Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is Mondays down south, and man, it's been a while. Man, it's good to be back. Took the week off. Had a pretty busy week. So obviously the guy stepped in, brought in a guest from good old Austin here. So I appreciate you guys doing that. We're back, and fun topic again today. I mean, this is a really interesting week in particular because we get to watch the Monday night games tonight. And by the time this is posted, it's either going to be Wednesday or Thursday, and that will be in preparation for the fantasy football playoffs.
Yes, sir.
And that's where things get real dirty real quick. I mean, 6 out of the 12 teams in normal leagues go to the playoffs here, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5, lots of trash talk in between. But hey, no matter what happens, just remember, you are enough, just like Evan's sweatshirt says. All right. So without further ado, I will send it over to Sai for the topic. We got a good one for you that is fantasy football oriented. So Sai, go ahead and take it away.
This seems especially appropriate too, because we're in so many, leagues independently, but obviously the two we're in together. We have a joint team with MDS, which you guys have heard about, and we're in the playoffs, fighting for championship this year. And then in the other league, I got the 1 seed, Zach's got the 3 seed. And Evan is this close to getting in. He needs a big showing from our boy Garrett tonight. I think he's ruled himself out, but me and Zach haven't. So we're going to be keying in on tonight's Miami game. We need Tua and Tyreek not to be too amazing. So we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, this is a great time. We're talking about, Zach teed it up. We're talking about it. So I'm going to go right into it. We're picking one of numbers 1 all the way through 12 in the first round of a fantasy football draft for your playoff draft. Who are the guys that you want? The number 1 overall pick for me will be who I think should have been the number 1 overall pick this year, even though I won JJ in our league. That is Christian McCaffrey. I believe Christian McCaffrey, especially with the running back position being as volatile as it's been this season and with the number of injuries and everything that we've had, he's been a legitimate workhorse, which pretty much guarantees you he's matchup proof and gets you at least 15 points a week with the ceiling of like 30 or more. So I'm taking C-Mac all the way as my number 1 overall pick. That's I don't need to, debate that anymore.
Yeah, it's pretty self-explanatory. I'll shift it over to another guy that I'm thinking about. This is Tyreek Hill at number 2. Tyreek has just been unbelievable this year. And I actually remember the days where top corners like Jalen Ramsey would say, oh, he's not a real receiver. He's a punt returner. He's a special teams guy because of his sheer speed, but he can't develop into a receiver. And just when you thought he had hit his pinnacle with Patrick Mahomes, you see him take off with Mike McDaniels and with Tua. I'm just going to not even try to pronounce his last name right now. It's been late. But overall, Tyreek with 12 touchdowns, 1,500 yards. He's on pace for almost 2,000 yards, about 120 receptions. And at this pace, probably 15 or 16 touchdowns, depending on what he does tonight. So, it's just really, really incredible to see the fact that he has not only blossomed to a top 3 receiver, but I would say the top receiver, and it's not even a close second. Beforehand, we would kind of throw guys like Devontae Adams in the mix. Obviously, he's on the Raiders, and the production level is a little bit limiting, but Tyreek is proven all doubters wrong, and he's my number 2 overall pick.
No notes on either of these.
I just want to clarify. You're saying you go C-Mac 1 and then you go Tyreek 2, Zach? I want to make sure I understood that correctly.
Definitely. I agree with your C-Mac pick just because of the sheer touchdown volume. I mean, he is a touchdown juggernaut. So, yeah, C-Mac 1 for sure.
So, you got 1 and 2 the same, or do you have any switch up in that order?
No notes. Those are my top 2 as well. No notes. Number 3 for me is going to go back to the wide receiver market. I'm going to go to CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb just had a terrific year overall. Dak Prescott's playing at an elite level. He's scoring touchdowns. He's getting volume. He's gaining yards. Cowboys still fighting for the 1 seed in the division lead, so I think they'll still be They do have a very hard schedule, but that could even help CD in terms of like keeping the ball in the air throughout these games. So I just think he's been rock solid all year. He's been an absolute stud, and I don't see that changing over the next 3 weeks for the fantasy playoffs. So that's gonna be my 3 challenges.
No, and the other thing is the segment is talking about guys we want going into the playoffs rather than overall, and there's nobody hotter in the entire league than CeeDee Lamb. I wouldn't even be mad at someone for making an argument for saying I want CeeDee more than anyone else, like just given the target share that he's getting. But I'm with you there.
Quick aside too, let's not forget that at 14, the Denver Broncos had the choice of getting Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb. And I hate playing this game because Jerry Jeudy was the right pick at that point in time, but they went with Jeudy. And then CD went after, and then Justin Jefferson went after that. So quick aside there for our boy CD.
Crazy.
And we are snaking, right? So I'll go to number 4. Helpful note, obviously we're not creating a team here, right? This is a full first round, so we're not worried about like stacking the multiple positions. So this one's a tough one for me. I got 2 guys. I might go to the I'm going to, based on recent trends, go with maybe a different guy. I'm going to go with Kyren Williams here. Since he's come off the injury, he's just a volume monster. McVay wants a guy that he can play on all 3 downs, both to run between the tackles, to get receptions, and to pass block, which doesn't affect us in fantasy, but it does keep him on the field. So the Rams are in the race. They're going to be feeding Kyren. Last week, no touchdowns against Baltimore, but in matchups where they can kind of control the game script, as I think they will this week against the Commanders, I think he's a good bet to get potentially multiple touchdowns. If you look on weekly averages, he's third in terms of fantasy football points per week when you take out, obviously, all the injuries. So that's going to be my second running back off the board. I think there's a few guys you could have taken here, but I definitely think he should be, be one of the top running backs going here.
Who you got, Zebo?
So I got to disagree with that one because Evan's a big volume guy, and I heard volume before with him. But if you look at Derrick Henry, he is a sheer volume guy, but not a lot of production in terms of this year. And I would essentially disagree with you because my guy at 4, and I'll pick him here at 5, is Travis Etienne. And Travis Etienne does get the volume, but he also gets a lot of production because he gets receiving yards. And with those receiving yards come receiving touchdowns. So, when I look at a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are fighting tooth and nail to win their division, with the Colts kind of banging down the door right now, and the Texans, Trevor Lawrence is going to have to play. He's fighting through that ankle injury, but they don't want him to be in the pocket too long. And so they're playing to win. They're playing to score points. And Travis Etienne is going to be the heart of that offense moving forward. So whether it's the run or the pass, he's going to be amply utilized. And I think that's what makes Etienne a huge threat here for the rest of the season.
So to clarify, Zach, you're going Etienne as 4, right? Because I know we're doing our order of 1 to 12, right? So you're saying you'd have Etienne as 4, whereas Evan has Kyren at 4, right?
Yeah. I would pick him before Kyren for sure. But I guess in this long list right here, I'm kind of like adapting with the draft. But I would go with Etienne 4 for sure.
I think that's how we got to do it. We got to go through the 12 as if it's a normal draft. And then I guess you can maybe clarify how high you would have taken him earlier.
Okay.
I guess
that's what you're saying. So you're saying treat my next guy as 6?
Yeah.
So pick your top guy that's left on the board.
Okay.
And if you want to also say that,
that.
I actually would have taken him as high as 4, and then you can talk about our picks.
Yeah,
too,
I like that. I like that, and that tees me up perfectly because I'm going AJ Brown, and I'm taking AJ Brown over both of those guys. And that's a no question for me personally because although I realize his last game or two hasn't been as hot, the reality is if you ask this question of let's make this draft like 4 weeks ago, AJ Brown would have easily been top 3 for most people, and their schedule gets way easier going into the playoffs compared to how brutal it was prior to that with the defenses they faced, because they just faced Dallas and San Francisco. And you know what happens when they play teams they're supposed to beat? AJ Brown absolutely dominates. So I'm taking AJ Brown, no questions asked with my next pick, and I love that he was available to me. So I'll leave it at that.
He was actually 4, but I wanted to talk about Kyren, so I agree with you with taking him there. The interesting thing about the schedule, actually, maybe we'll talk about it later in recaps, but like the Cowboys and Eagles, who's going to win this division? I feel like everyone's kind of on the Cowboys because they did just throttle them, but the schedules are, the Cowboys have an incredibly difficult schedule. The Eagles have a very easy schedule. So it does look like the Eagles are probably going to still be able to hold on to that division despite their recent form. But
yeah,
we'll
and if they both win out, the Eagles still win it. So there's that note as well.
Yeah. So that means you're up to 7, Si?
I'm snaking, right? Okay, yeah. So my number 7. Okay, this is where things get a little bit interesting because I got a couple guys I really like here. This is going to sound insane given the most recent injury. Don't know if I should do this or not.
I know you're
I'm gonna swerve him just because
you can't do what I think you're about to say.
I know what he's doing.
I'm not gonna do it, but a report did come out today saying that Jetta actually should be playing again this weekend.
Justin Jones and Keenan.
No.
I was like, you want Easton Stickers recorded?
No, not Keenan. I was gonna say Jay Jetta because even when he played for 2 minutes, he got 2 immediate receptions. So clearly the plan is to feed him, and he's supposed to be good to go this weekend. However, I don't want to run that risk. So I'm actually going to go with the floor guy, a floor guy that has a ceiling, and that's Alvin Kamara, who is just Mr. Consistent. Whether the Saints suck or whether the Saints are good, you can pretty much guarantee he's going to give you at least 12 to 14 fantasy points because he gets so much work in the passing game as well as the running game. And then you also saw for a few weeks there that he had multiple touchdowns in several games. So especially with Derek Carr playing, the guy gets so many targets. And if you have some PPR or half PPR, he is such a solid performer. So I want Kamara because there's definitely guys on the board still who definitely have higher upside than him. Like Kyron, for example, that Evan mentioned. But I just want someone who I know I can rely on in the playoffs, that when I put them in my lineup, they're going to give me consistent production. I can build around that. So that's why I'm going Kamara. It's not a sexy pick, but it's with a more safe floor pick. So I like Kamara there.
I really like that pick, Si. I think that's the perfect spot for Kamara, especially in a half PPR, full PPR setting for some of these leagues. But one of my favorite parts about that point was the fact that you mentioned consistency. Because there's nothing more frustrating than when you're a fantasy football owner going into the first round of the playoffs, your team is promising, and then you just start sucking terribly in the playoffs first round because your team is inconsistent. They don't perform the week you need them to perform. I've got Mike Evans as a guy who is Mr. Consistent. He's a guy that is going to deliver regardless of the quarterback. And let me tell you why I would draft him right here. I would draft him right here if we're looking at current state and forward looking, because this man has not only surpassed 1,000 yards again so far this season, but he has double-digit touchdowns. And he's just the quiet behemoth that is a motor. He is always going to get you at least 13, 14 points, and every point counts at this point in the season as you go up against these big-time matchups with your buddies. So I think Mike Evans will provide you with that safety valve that Keenan Allen might not, due to Herbert's injury. So Mike Evans is next up for me.
That's a bold one, Zach.
That's actually, I just checked his stats. I didn't realize it's actually not a bad pick. I mean, if you take out last week where he did the opposite of what you're saying and he only got one catch or something. He has been consistently 10 to 20 points. So sneaky pick there, Zach. Nice job.
That's because AJ Terrell had him on straps, baby.
He's not wrong.
Yeah, well, the Bucs still won the game. So does that? Oh no, so it's me now.
Yeah.
This is a tough one. I am going to. Yeah, I'm going to go to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think for similar reasons that Zach mentioned. I think maybe doesn't have those kind of nuclear games, but he's just super consistent, getting that 8 to 10 receptions a game. A lot of underneath stuff, gets a lot of volume in that way. Is good to score a touchdown on most weeks. Lions have been a little iffy, but I'm not too familiar with their schedule the rest of the way. But he's been pretty matchup proof. So I think he's just a steady guy to get you a nice floor and be a consistent producer for you. Where does that leave me? Am I at 9?
I think so.
Yeah, not that it matters. But I'm just trying. So
right, I think you're at 10. I think this is the final one. This is the final swing.
I think we're doing 12 picks, though, right?
Yeah, so he's on 10.
Oh, yeah,
11.
so that must be 9.
Gotcha.
So then this one maybe a little riskier. I'm going to go to Devon Achane, not A-Chain. So this is a guy, when he's been on the field, has just been electric. 1 or 2 touchdowns a week. he doesn't get kind of the traditional touches or kind of the traditional usage as much because they use him in a very unique way. But he's just such an insanely explosive player when he's on the field. And I think as we get into the colder months, they're going to have to run the ball more than putting it in the air, depending on what their schedule looks like. I actually think they have 2 home games, so that probably helps them from a weather standpoint. But he's just been so lights out on when he's on the field. I think I have him at number 2 running back on a weekly basis when he plays. So, he's a little riskier from a health standpoint, given that he was dealing with injuries over the last few weeks. And there's also kind of, if he doesn't get the touchdowns, then he's maybe not as effective. But, take a little more risk here, but get tons of upside there.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Love that pick, Ev. I would disagree because of the usage that Monster's still getting. It's too hard to predict. Both of the running backs are incredible. They're really talented. They could be starters on any team in the NFL. But the problem is who's going to get the touchdown. And I feel like both of those players, whether it's Monster or HN, is they are kind of dependent on that touchdown because they're going to split carries. That's my only worry with the first round draft pick. So I would actually replace Achane with Stephon Diggs. And Stephon Diggs has not performed exceptionally well this season. He was a late first round draft pick to start the season, but I still think that he is worthy of a late first round pick right now. And the reason I believe that is I think that the Bills are going to heat up. Right now in the AFC, I think there's like 5 or 6 teams that are 7-6. It's coming down to the wire. If the Bills want it, they need to go out and do what they do best, throw the football. And Josh Allen has struggled this season. It's been one of his worst seasons, and he deserves a lot of criticism. But Stephon Diggs is the guy that can bail him out of jail here. When those 2 guys are on, they are unstoppable. And Stephon Diggs has the talent, even though he's a little bit older. I just think that they need to get back to the basics, throw the football to him, and let the Bills do what they do and march into the playoffs. So I've got Stephon Diggs under the faith that he's going to get a lot more targets than he has the last couple of weeks.
I want to make a quick counterpoint. I actually would go with Evan's pick over yours, which is wild because I never at the end of the season thought that I would leave Diggs out over Achane, although Diggs would probably crack my top 12 if I was just making my own list. The reason I pick Achane is the man has played 6 games. And in 6 games, even though he doesn't get all the snaps, he gets in this last couple games that he's played, he's gotten a higher snap share than Raheem Mostert. And in those 6 games, he's had over 600 all-purpose yards and 9 touchdowns. 9 touchdowns in 6 games. So you want to talk about a guy that literally can win you a matchup in 1 week by just absolutely popping off. That's Devon Achane. And the other thing is their schedule plays to it. Even with them playing the Cowboys, I think he's such a matchup-proof guy because when you give him the ball in open space, it's ridiculous. So I agree with Evan. Like I want Achane in there, but I also understand having Diggs in too. I just would have Achane higher. And I'm glad Evan included him because I wanted to include him. I think pick 12 rounds it out. So this is the last pick. It's hilarious because when you look at a lot of lists and a lot of people's conversations, because of how much the Chiefs have struggled recently, people just have stopped talking about Travis Kelce. And the reality is he is still by far and away the best fantasy tight end with consistency. The guy's missed, I think, 3 or 4 games this season, and he's still, I believe, leading, if not like right at the top for all tight end categories, because even when the Chiefs suck, even in the games where they don't score a lot of points, he still consistently gets anywhere from like 12 to 15 points. And at the tight end position, that is such a positional advantage that if I can get Kelce at the end of the first round and I can just supplant it with a bunch of other guys that have a ton of upside, I want Mr. Consistent at tight end because you need that in the playoffs at the tight end position if you're facing someone who already has good players everywhere else. So I think Kelce deserves to be on the list, whether people want to give him credit or not.
My challenge, and I present to you a different case, my boy Evan Engram, who is equally been consistent this year, maybe for a few less points per week, but has actually been popping off lately. So maybe he has more upside. But Evan, especially with the check down nature of the Jaguars offense and the fact that Christian Kirk is out, because basically Evan Engram and Christian Kirk get the same kind of targets, whereas Ridley and Zay Jones get the same kind of targets. So without Kirk, they check down to Engram all the time. So I can take him a few rounds later in this situation and be pretty comfortable at tight end. Even if, obviously I'd rather have Kelce, but I'd rather just take Engram later. That's my challenge to Travis Kelce.
I will challenge you right back by saying that I believe, has Engram missed a game this season? He's played every game, right?
Yeah.
So Ingram's played every game, and he's had, I believe, his first touchdown since like the early weeks, like was this like past week or something like that, right? So Ingram's played every single game and he's had 700 yards receiving and has had 3 touchdowns. Travis Kelce's, I think, had more than double the number of touchdowns Evan Ingram's had and has 800 yards or more. And he's played literally 4 less games than Evan Ingram has, or 3 less games. So, I mean, that just goes to show the discrepancy in tight end right there. Like, Kelce's on a different planet than everyone else. The only person I could argue would be Mark Andrews with consistency if he was on the field, but he's off. So maybe Hawkinson, I don't know. But the reality is Kelce's such a differentiator to me still.
Well, but if you take Hawkinson, you're getting, if you look at the full season, it's like a little over a point a week, right? Whereas you can get Hawkinson like 2 rounds later. I guess that's my point. And Evan Ingram over the full season is a little over 3 a week. But if you look at the recent trend and the fact that Kirk is out, the late usage, and I mean, but he's just an example. But I just think you can.
I get where you're coming from now.
Kelce's been a bummer this year.
Honestly, I'm sick and tired of Kelce. He's been a complete bummer this year in terms of first round camaraderie. Like, he used to be a first round draft pick, but when you have 5 touchdowns and you have half as many yards as you did last season, you don't even worth to be in the second round. So, I will acknowledge, Cy, that Travis Kelce is the best tight end. Obviously, that we're not like denying that or anything like that, but he is not a first round fantasy pick anymore at this point. I'm so done with it. He's getting the yards, but not the touchdowns this year. And honestly, the Chiefs have just been drama galore this whole season, and it's been really infuriating. I'd much rather go with a guy that gets a lot of volume, like a Derrick Henry or a Joe Mixon here at 12. I think that those guys are a lot more. Joe Mixon has 8
He's
touchdowns
so
this season.
Bro. Because they give him like 3 tries on the goal line. I was so frustrated this week. I was like, dude, it's first and goal for the 1. They just kept hammering him. It took him like 3 tries, but he finally got it.
Which, to be fair to Zach, though, that's the point, right? Like, you want the guy that's going to give you points. And so I don't blame him for putting Mixon there. I think Derrick Henry is the wild one there, because the reality is, I understand Zach's out on the Chiefs, but I think it's in a way clouding your judgment on how still dominant Kelce is. Like, I understand that he didn't live up to his number 4, number 5 overall pick, but in fantasy football, positional advantage is a deal breaker. It really is. And I think it's a position where Kelce, when he's played, even when the Chiefs have sucked, has still been the best fantasy tight end. And it's not even arguable. You can go look at his stats compared to other guys. He's played 3 or 4 less games than everyone else and has still managed to have the same level of statistics. That's crazy when you think about his points per game perspective, even when the Chiefs have sucked. And if their schedule gets easier, and let's say they do play a little bit better, we could go back to seeing Kelce getting 17, 18. So for me, it's positional advantage, because, you might be able to argue Derrick Henry or Joe Mixon, but Saquon Barkley's still on the board. I got a bunch of running backs I still got on the board that can give me points. I don't have as many tight ends, in my opinion, that I'm comfortable with week after week, because Evan mentioned Ingram, and next week Ingram could go put up a dud. And I'm not trusting of Ingram.
Ingram never puts up duds. He always gets like 7 points. He doesn't have
and 7 in the 5th round.
Though.
And 7 is not pretty to me, man. Like, that's
I
can get a running back.
But Kelce
I'll give me 10.
Kelce over the last 3 weeks has only been averaging like 10, and that's kind of
he's been averaging like 12 and half PPR, which I'll take every day.
No, dude,
that's a 5-point. That's a 5-point difference in your fantasy football.
No, 11, 12, 10, 11. So 11. And his average on the year his average on the year is 13. I'm going to give you some other players that have like 13 point per game averages on the year. Austin Eckler, who people hate.
He's a running back. Are you kidding me right now?
Well, no, but Austin.
Tight end.
But where are you taking? Like, Austin Eckler right now is probably like RB like 50 to 20 on this board, on your board going into the fantasy playoffs. Like, I'm not going to sacrifice that kind of value just to get a positional advantage. Is my point.
If that's your argument, then Travis Kelce would never go top 5 to 6 in a draft, even in the prior years, because the reality is, even in Travis Kelce's best years, he was nowhere near a wide receiver or a running back that was going at the same pick in terms of overall fantasy points. The difference is positional advantage. That's the only reason people take Kelce that high. If you're going purely based on a points per game or points overall in the course of a season, Travis Kelce would never be a first-round pick, even in his best years, because the guy you can get at an 8 or 9 is going to be higher. But the reality is, you just told me Kelce's averaging 13 points a week in fantasy football at the tight end position. Who is second? Second is probably what, like 9 or 10?
No, it's 11.
Even then, you're seeing a difference every week.
11-9, excuse me. It's 12. It's only an extra point.
And even that, Hawk is maybe your one example, right? Like I can argue a ton of running backs or wide receivers that can make up that difference if you take them in the second or third. That's my point. But I'm a Kelsey truther all through and through because he's been consistent for me.
I get your
fellas,
argument.
how about this? Well, here's what I'm thinking. I think I can find some reconciliation here. We missed one clear guy, and so I say we pass
It's
Kelsey to the first pick of the second round.
Honorable mention time. I agree.
It's honorable mention
Samuel,
time,
baby.
That was one of mine.
Yes, sir.
The problem with him is like
absolutely crushing it.
He's the guy that will throw up a dud more so because of how Kyle uses him. Like Kyle just kind of chooses who's getting the ball that week, but his just last few weeks have been so crazy that like it's definitely someone at the end of the first, high second, I think.
And that's what's made the 49ers so dominant. But I'll let you, Sai, talk about your boy Debo here.
Well, that's what's interesting, right? Because obviously, and to preface for people that are listening to this segment, Zach and I actually made a trade a few weeks ago where I gave up Debo, mainly because I needed to upgrade running back a little bit more because I was a little bit more concerned about my lack of depth there. And I already had Keenan and Justin Jefferson at wide receiver. So I traded Debo, but not because I don't love Debo. You guys know how much I love Debo. I did it because those two I'm obviously starting over Debo. And the reality is me and Evan and Zach Klein, who was one of our regular guests, had a pretty good argument on a group chat of like, oh, Debo's not raising the floor. And I had to make the argument of, you could argue Debo, week to week is just as valuable as Gibbs because Gibbs is less consistent right now than Debo is, right? And that's the reality of it. Gibbs pops off one week and then the next week gives you like an 8-point game sometimes. And the reality is Debo, I think the 49ers realize when you get him involved, whether it's through the run game, which is what we're understating because he scores a rushing touchdown almost every game now, plus the receiving game, that's where Debo becomes a fantasy nightmare for people. And this is what happened when he was, a top 3, top 4 player 2-3 years ago when before he got hurt, when him and I think it was him and Cooper Kupp were like two of the top players in fantasy football the entire year. Debo obviously behind Kupp, but that's my point. I think Debo's a really good point there, Zach, and I'm glad you brought him up. But we're definitely missing a couple people. The other person I wanted to throw out there, and I think we are completely overlooking him, and it's hilarious because he's on Zach's team, is Bijan. He's way more involved now than he was early in the year. They're actually using him, and he's putting up points. Like, the thing with fantasy football is people get too stuck on, oh, what did you do for me early? What did you do for me? Like with the bias of like, oh, how have you impacted my team early? But then they don't look at the guys who at the end of the season, like, might win you the league. And Bijan is in that territory right now with his usage going up. It's similar to when Evan picked up Derrick Henry a few years ago towards the end of the season because they started using him more. And then he ran through our playoffs because the coach realized, hey, I'm kind of being dumb. Maybe I should give my best player the football. And I think that's what's happening with Bijan right now. And I would take Bijan at the end of the first round at a running back position.
He's probably close. One of mine honorable mentions, it's definitely a riskier one, but it's DJ Moore. So DJ Moore is a top 10 is a top 10 receiver average this year, higher than Mike Evans, higher than Stephon Diggs. But half of that was with Tyson Bagent. And when he plays with Justin Fields, like they actually, I mean, it's a little difficult to watch because you're usually relying on a long touchdown. Like they had this week, but like they have a good connection and they make some big time plays together and he really feeds them. So, and even with Tyson Bagent being his quarterback for like half the year, he's still a top 10 receiver on a weekly basis. So
that's a good one. That's a good one. Cause I was concerned about DJ's streakiness, but that does kind of fall in tangent with Debo Samuel a little bit too. They're both incredible playmakers, but you just have to feed them the ball. I did want to say something about Bijan Robinson, knowing how, sports degenerates in America are. They had speculated that Arthur Smith had benched Bijan Robinson. This was on the Pat McAfee podcast today because he vaped in his face as he got off the team bus on an away game a couple weeks ago.
No way.
And that was the circulating rumor of why Bijan Robinson was benched for a couple of games midway through the season, ironically against the Buccaneers, the team that they just played. So, luckily, he's coming back. And obviously as that division race gets hot in the NFC South, we're going to need Bijan to play every snap that we can afford. So we'll hopefully get back at him there next week.
That would be awesome if that's true.
I also
it's
think,
definitely not.
I also think, Evan, that I'm so glad you brought him up because I had a star around DJ Moore to mention as a late round, like first round pick for me, because he is less volatile than a lot of the guys we just mentioned when Justin Fields is on the field. The reality is, outside of the first like 2 to 3 weeks with Fields, when Fields was just really struggling and couldn't get the ball out, the chemistry between those two before Fields got hurt and like now that Fields is back is right there with almost any other wide receiver. I mean, DJ Moore is averaging like over 15 points a game over his last like 5 games with Justin Fields, and in 2 of those he's gone over like 30. He had a 40-point game with Justin Fields. The reality is DJ Moore probably should be like 7th or 8th in my rankings if I'm doing it based on what he's capable of with Fields. So that's a really good point, Adam. I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah, I had him 10, and the problem I have with DJ from a trustworthiness standpoint is a lot of his points they feel more fluky than others. So, like this week, well, like if you take that Commanders game where he just was abusing Emmanuel Forbes for like 3 touchdowns, like that was kind of an outlier. And then this week he had 2 touchdowns, one of which was on a free play that Justin Fields drew the Packers off sides. And I think the cornerback kind of stopped and it was just a wide open touchdown. And then the second one was an end around rushing touchdown. Not to take away from him, because obviously, he consistently burns guys, and, these types of things seem to happen fairly consistently enough to where they're believable. But his production is a little less, it's volatile in the way it happens, I guess, less so that it does happen, but more in how it happens, which makes me nervous. But yeah, he's been a stud.
Yeah, I understand what you're coming from. It's more creative with them, but as long as you get the touches, that's all I care about.
As long as it happens, and it has been happening. So, should we do recaps?
I real quick before recaps, I do have a quick question for you too. Give me one player that's not in anywhere near the first round, but just a guy that you're like, hey, and I'm putting these 2 on the spot for people listening, by the way, because we didn't think of this earlier, but as we were having this conversation, it came to mind. Give me one player, like maybe on one of your teams, just someone you've been watching where you're like, this guy could completely, transform my team in the playoffs that like people aren't thinking about right now. And if you want, I can start. Like, for example, for me, that's Zay Flowers, because since Mark Andrews has gotten hurt, Lamar Jackson is relying heavily on him in terms of targets, and especially meaningful targets, like red zone targets. Zay Flowers back-to-back weeks has had touchdowns, and he's getting upwards of like 9 to 10 targets. Last week he had 6 receptions, 60 yards and a touchdown. And the week before he had a touchdown and a rush for a touchdown. So Flowers is getting really involved. So that's an example of someone that a couple weeks ago you wouldn't even consider starting, and now you're like, wait, this could be a legitimate flex option for me in the playoffs. I'm wondering if you guys have anyone like that.
From mine, what's been really interesting on this podcast is hearing about the positional leverage that you had mentioned, Cy, with drafting Kelsey. So I'll stay in the tight end department. Let's go Sam Laporta. He is quickly becoming Jared Goff's favorite target in Detroit. So much that, the Amon St. Browns, right? The guys that we would wholeheartedly draft in the first round. We haven't even discussed Laporta, but Laporta's getting more targets recently. He's getting more touchdowns, and he's converting on those targets. He's got like a 90% completion rate when the ball is thrown in his direction. So I think if you can leverage that rookie tight end that you drafted maybe in like the 12th or 13th round, and you can pair that with the Ayuks of the world, you've got a really dangerous team going into the playoffs.
I like that, Zach, especially giving a shout out to the 2 tight ends like Laporta and Kincaid, who you got late that are making noise at the end of the year. That's smart. What about you, E?
So one guy, this is maybe kind of cheating, but like Cooper Kupp, because he's typically a first round kind of guy, and he finally kind of got back on the same page with Stafford this week. So he's still pretty high up, so that's maybe kind of cheating. So I'll go with a deeper one that is injury dependent, but Ezekiel Elliott. True. If Ramondre Stevenson is still out, he's going to go off. I mean, he got my boy Marty, shout out, was joking with me. He was like debating benching Austin Eckler for Zeke, and we were all like, nah, dude, you can't do that, you're crazy. And then he was like, dude, he's gonna get 30 touches. And I literally laughed at him. I was like, dude, Zeke is not getting 30 touches. He got exactly 30 touches in that Pittsburgh game. So the problem is they're probably not gonna have the same kind of game script, and obviously this is dependent on Ramondre being out, but if Ramondre is still out, man, that's definitely a high-end starter.
That's a good one. Don't sleep on McKinnon either, by the way, for as long as Pacheco's out.
Yeah, that's. I'll Hopefully Pacheco comes back.
I hope he's back. Me too.
He's so fun to watch, man.
He's so fun to watch.
He
He's
runs so
fun.
angry, man. He's fantastic.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a good segue into the games.
Let's do it.
One of my most interesting takeaways, guys, was when I was perusing these Week 14 spreads. These spreads were pretty tight, and that's what made this week so difficult. There were a lot of spreads that were between 2.5 to 5.5 points. There weren't those major spreads that we've seen now, albeit the Miami spread tonight, it's like 13.5. But, for the gist of it, the majority of the games had those tight spreads. However, the games were so there were multiple games where they weren't even close. Like a couple examples: Bengals Colts 34-14, Jets Texans 30-6, Saints Panthers 28-6, Broncos Chargers 24-7, the Eagles Cowboys game last night, and so on. So I think in these type of weeks, the spreads might get condensed as these teams are making that final push to the playoffs. But I can actually treat that as like opportunistic, where, okay, this is a good opportunity for us to really believe in the teams we think are good, that are going to get pushed over the needle here, and just continually bet them, because you're starting to see a lot of teams separate themselves from the rest of the pack. So that was one thing that I found really interesting about Week 14, but I'll kind of open it up to you guys and see which games you guys want to talk about.
Yeah, I think these betting weeks are so hard, but the counterpoint, I think, to that, Zach, is that I think a lot of the really good teams, this is where they kind of hit a rough patch. I mean, if I remember last year with the Eagles, they lost kind of like 3 in a row around the same time, and it was like, oh, are they not that good? And it was just kind of them, like, I don't want to say gearing down, but for whatever reason, it kind of felt like they were kind of gearing down and getting rid of the playoffs. And the Chiefs are in a similar boat right now. And but we all know once the playoffs start, these teams are going to be completely fine. So, I mean, you mentioned the Colts Bengals. I do want to shout out the Bengals here. I feel like, similar to how the College Football Playoff Committee treats injured quarterbacks, I think a lot of fans tend to write teams off the second their starting quarterback gets hurt. Bengals are still a really good team, man. They have a shot to make the playoffs here, and Jake Browning's playing pretty well. So I think they were written off when Joe Burrow went down, and the team kind of around Jake Browning started to play better than they did with Joe Burrow, because they realized they needed to step up, and they deserve a lot of credit for being a pretty good team handedly, and giving themselves a shot at the playoffs. So.
I gotta give credit where credit's due. You two were on that one.
Mainly Zach. I don't deserve credit because I picked the Colts, but Zach, attaboy.
Well, the Matrix works, boys.
The Matrix does work. Nicely done. And I will say I want to give credit where credit's due. Yeah, Browning definitely deserves a ton of credit. He looks like a legitimate, like one of the best backups in the NFL, because he's not just one of those backups that does like 5-yard dunks. He'll throw the ball down the field. And admittedly, I'll admit it, I think he's better than Minshew in terms of ceiling, and even with Minshew putting us in a playoff race, which I'm not trying to disrespect my guy, but I try to keep it honest when I can. I'm pretty upset with our team this year, or this week, especially because the reason we've been on the tear that we've been, and we've won like 4 in a row prior to this one, is because we're playing smart football where we weren't turning the ball over and winning the close games. And we shot ourselves in the foot like 8 times, and the Bengals just torched us. After that, we tied it up at the end with some crazy 14-14. Then they destroyed us in the second half. So that's a learning lesson for us. And shout out to the Bengals, like you guys mentioned. Jumping to another game, I want to give even though the Ravens won, I want to give a shout out to the Rams, because I said earlier in the year that I believe the Rams are better than they are on paper, and I didn't stick to my guns this week, and I picked the Ravens to cover the spread at home, and I hate myself for that. Hate is a strong word, but I'm upset with myself for that, because the Rams look good, man. Like, I'm not saying they're going to go win the Super Bowl, but if I was an NFC team, I wouldn't be excited to play them in the playoffs, because Stafford is getting the ball out quickly, and their receiving core is really good. Even Demarcus Robinson is contributing as like a 3rd, 4th receiver, and Kupp looks better. Kyron Williams is a stud, and Aaron Donald is still there. He's still top 3, top 5 defense player in the league. So the Rams are good, but yeah, shout out to the Ravens. Huge comeback win in that game, and another big one at home. And you got to consider them a top 3 team at this point.
I've begun to come around on the Rams. They can maybe sneak into that 7th playoff spot in the NFC, but they're playing well. Give them credit.
That would be a tough one, Ev. I know that would be as much of a surprise as you get into the playoffs, because you've been kind of creeping up from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7. So we'll see if that happens. But one game I wanted to quickly mention was the Lions and the Bears. And Ev, I'll give you some credit where credit's due here. You were warning us from moving forward full speed with the Lions, because They do not play well in the cold. And I will challenge you this. Evan had mentioned earlier, there are teams that regress at this point in time too. Good teams like the Eagles, right? But I think the Lions are even more of a concern. They're 9-4. They slipped a couple games. They've lost to these type of opponents in the cold weather that are notoriously under 500. And if you think about it, let's just say the Eagles get back on track. It's cold in San Francisco as well in those 1 and 2 seed matchups in the playoffs. You think the Lions are going to confidently go over there and win a game? I mean, it's going to be really tough. They're really good at home, but they struggle elsewhere. And I think it's not time to push the panic button in Detroit, but I think that they're starting to deviate back towards the mean here. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I'm kicking myself for not actually picking the Bears in my picks, because that would have been a great opportunity to gain one on you. But yeah, I started to get on that later in the week, because the other thing is the Bears aren't a bad team with Justin Fields playing pretty well, especially now that they got Montez Sweat, like especially at home. Like I think Justin Fields plays way better at home on grass for some reason. I think it's because his speed advantage makes a bigger difference. So I do want to shout out the Bears a little bit. I think they're better than people give them credit for when fully healthy. But yeah, the Lions, the home road thing is becoming very real, and it's tough to see them making a ton of noise in the playoffs because of it, unfortunately.
I'm glad you brought up picks too, because I know the segment's coming later, but I know I got absolutely smoked this week because every good team that I picked lost to all the teams you guys picked. So I'm about to fall back real far. So I got a big comeback to try to make it 3 seasons in a row of winning, and it's not looking pretty for me. But with that being said, that's on me too, because I got to stick with my gut. Like I know I've been saying that the Lions haven't looked that good the last couple of weeks. I've been on that train for like 4 weeks, and instead of picking the Bears, I said, let's pick the Lions to cover. And I don't know what I'm doing. Like, why am I second guessing myself? But the reality is Evan hit the nail on the head with that one. And I mean, I think you did the analysis perfectly. To jump to another one, speaking of picks, I mean, I picked Kansas City, and it's paid off for me usually like 70 to 80% of the time against the Bills. But in the regular season, again, the Bills came back and not came back, but they won this game. And then I got to give you guys credit where credit's due. You picked the Bills. Josh Allen showed up. I don't know what Stephon Diggs was doing. I don't know how they won that game with Diggs just basically like almost giving that game up in multiple ways. But yeah, no, they came back. We definitely got to talk about the Mahomes reaction at the end of the game. But I will say this, and I'm putting all excuses aside. I cannot understand or even comprehend how receivers can lose games for a team as much as they are for the Chiefs. And although they won the Super Bowl without a great starting wide receiver last year, even though, of course, they have Kelsey, who's the best tight end, it is actually shocking to me to think that team won with the receivers they had last year and how many games they've lost. They've lost 5 games, and I believe 3 or 4 of them were because a receiver made an absurd play that like a college receiver wouldn't make for them to lose it. And this one was the worst out of all of them. So I'd love to get y'all's reaction on that.
Yeah, I think it's pretty lame on the refs, to be honest with you. Like, he was offsides, but I was watching a Dan Orlovsky video, which I definitely recommend. I think he's got it on Twitter. Like, Kadarius Toney lined up offsides like at like 5 or 6 different points throughout the game, even more than that. Like, it's just like, because it's tricky to be exactly right on the line. So obviously, best practice is you're supposed to look at the ref, which I do jokingly all the time. You know, point down at the ref, like. Make sure you're good, but you actually do have to do that every play. So he didn't do that a single time in the entire game, is what Orlovsky noticed. But also the ref never went up to him and said, "Hey, you weren't on the line," and warned him. And then he just like in the most crucial play of the game, it turned out like threw a flag on him. Like, so it's definitely lame on the refs. I mean, he was offsides, but like this is one of those rules that like there's like an agreement, an unwritten rule between the players and the refs that you work together on this to make sure you're good and you don't screw someone over. So it's not as bad as the Terry McLaurin one against the Giants last year, which cost us a playoff spot, which is insane, by the way, for anyone that wants to go back and watch it. But this was like another bad one for the refs. And then Mahomes, this is 2 straight games that the refs have arguably cost the Chiefs when you look at the pass interference from last week. So I think it's just frustrations boiling over, for the second straight week of this happening. But that was a wild reaction from him that you'd never see.
I think that's really well said, Evan, because initially I would have disagreed with you until I just heard your assessment on it, because you're right. This is an open dialogue communication between referees and players. I saw I was watching a couple of the plays back, and I did see Kadarius he did kind of the motion where he looked to the side, but like it's just muscle memory at this point. Much like when
Right.
someone scores a basket, the person has to inbound the ball, and they just probably, they're probably stepping on the line to inbound it in an NBA game. Like, if it's a problem, if it's a recurring issue, then it's the referee's responsibility, because what Kadarius is thinking about is, okay, how am I going to run this route? What's the play that's called? If it's an option route, am I running out to the side of the field, or am I running a seam route down the middle? Like, there's so many things that he's thinking about in that moment that if he's off by an inch, like, yes, it's not the rules, but like the ref should have warned him multiple times during that game. So I think that was a little bit unfair, but on the grand scheme of things, I think karma gets the best of you. And I think that the Chiefs got away with a blatant call last year in the Super Bowl. And so maybe this is like karma's way of evening it out a little bit. But I also do have to crack Kadarius too, because at first he was Kadrapius, costing them an actual game. And now he's offsidus, or whatever nickname you want to even draw up here. But that's now 2 games that he is ruined for the Kansas City Chiefs. And when you look at an 8-5 record in comparison to a 10-3 record, that is a potential 1 or 2 seed difference. So, Kadarius needs to also step it up as well, because he's had the drop problems and now he's having the offside problems.
Yeah, pair that with MVS. Pair that with MVS dropping a perfectly thrown 50-yard ball, which then Mahomes, instead of throwing his receiver under the bus, goes in the press conference and says, "Oh, I probably could have thrown that ball a little bit lighter to get it to him." Like, he's a champion for a reason. He stands by his guys, even though if I was Mahomes, I'm sorry, like, I might be calm the first 2 times, but I'd be going on that press conference being like, "Screw these receivers, get me better receivers." I would be internally, I would be so angry I couldn't even hold it together, because the reality is, like, I have never seen someone get this screwed. And the funny part is, we don't even talk about like the vital third down plays in the middle of a game where he'll throw like a perfect ball to somebody and it'll just like hit them in the hands and they'll drop it. Like, it's absurd. I've never seen this in the NFL. Like, it's actually shocking to me, because most NFL receivers, if you watch their tape of like them practicing, they don't drop a ball. Like, you throw them 100 passes and they'll drop maybe one of them. And in these games, it's like consistent. So it's crazy. No excuses, though. I mean, the reality is the Chiefs went into this season knowing their wide receiver core wasn't good, and they thought they were going to be able to win like they did last year without a great number one. And this is proving to them that, okay, you did it last year, but it's time for you to, get some more guys out there. I still think they have the potential to figure it out, but that's a conversation for later when we talk about picks. But it was just worth mentioning. And the one last thing I'll say really quickly, so we can move on from this one, is last year that offensive offsides was called twice in the entire season. The one thing I'll give the refs credit for is it's been called 11 times this year already, so they're clearly trying to enforce it. The only thing I will say to Evan's argument or Evan's statement earlier is I agree with them. If they're going to call it, and he's already done it multiple times in the game, they should have either warned him earlier in the game or they should have called it, because most other times it's been called. Apparently there's been a warning issued to the player where they've said, hey, if you line up off sides, we're going to call it again. If you do that again. And instead they waited till the very last game when the Chiefs could have won that game on a amazing play, by the way, the Travis Kelce throw across the field. Like, that would have gone down in history as one of the coolest endings to a regular season game, and they took that away from everybody. So that's ridiculous. You guys still get your Bills pick for the week, but I got screwed out of one this week. That's all I got to say there.
Speaking of Kelce, he's going to do that in like a playoff game or like, gosh forbid, the Super Bowl or something, and it's going to be epic. He's done that multiple. Now this one was all the way across the field. It was insane. Usually it's a little closer, but he's done that a few times this year, and it's wild. But we should go to picks, but I want to last couple. Bucks Falcons is one of the more impactful games of the week because it now puts the Bucks in the driver's seat for the division. But yeah, kind of a dumpster fire division. But hey, the Bucks are winning that battle so far. A 3-way tie.
Yeah. Well, who do you think wins that division, Evan?
Did the Falcons beat the Bucks the first time?
Yes.
So they're tied.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably going to call me crazy. I think the Falcons are going to hold on and win it. That's who I picked at the beginning of the year, actually. I kind of wavered between them and the Saints, but I'm going to stick with the Falcons more so to just kind of stick with my pregame pick. But I don't know. They just lost at home to the Bucks. It's tough to say, but I'd have to look at schedules, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not trying to piss you off here, but quite frankly, I don't care because none of those teams deserve to win a division, and one of them is going to. And they're going to
go
go into the playoffs, and hopefully they'll lose to whoever they play, because none of those teams should be in the
Cowboys.
playoffs, in my opinion. Just like my Colts shouldn't be in the playoffs. It's the same belief I have. Teams that aren't like that have good foundations but are in a situation where the NFL has so many injuries are managing to win week over week. Not that they haven't gotten big wins, and they're going to get into the playoffs. And the reality is, we're just seeing we're seeing like the level of competition not as good as it usually is across the board because of these injuries. That's how I feel right now.
They'll draw Cowboys or Eagles, whoever doesn't win the division. So I don't think
and if one of those teams manages to lose to an NFC South team, I will roast them for the next decade. That's all I got to say. Especially if it's the Cowboys. I think Evan is literally going to throw a parade in New York if the Cowboys lose to an NFC South team.
I'll be like Stephen A. Smith, where he comes into First Take the next morning with like a full cigar and a cowboy hat. That'll be me on Mondays down south.
Did you give the Cowboys their due this week, though, Evan? You did pick them. So
I was going to mention, I wasn't shocked by that outcome with how the Eagles are playing, but they look great. They look great. Yeah, they're doing a great job.
You both called that one. I thought the Eagles were going to take their cookies again, and they didn't.
The Eagles are not playing well, and the receiver fumbled. Like, what did they have? 3 fumbles? Like, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith both fumbled? Like, come on. Like, that game would have been much closer if they didn't shoot themselves in the foot. But, give the Cowboys credit for stripping it, but go ahead, Bill. All right, recapping where the standings are. As Cy mentioned, he bombed last week and went 6-9. Zach and I were a little bit better, so Zach has a 1-game lead at 117. I am at 116, 1 game behind. Cy's at 114, so he's just only 3 games off the lead, so it's still close. Yeah. Thursday night football, battle of a couple backup quarterbacks. We got the Chargers with Easton Stick at the Raiders with Aiden O'Connell coming off a 0-point performance this week. Raiders are a 3-point favorite at home. I'll say Raiders win, but don't cover. Just, arbitrary selection. Zach?
I think this game might be 0-0. This might beat the 3-0 game. Give me the Chargers to win and I guess money line here.
Yeah, I should have changed my pick. Cy?
Yeah, I'm going to go Chargers money line as well. I just have no faith in the Raiders at this point.
I actually think, that's a good selection. But,
you can't switch up now, man.
No, I know.
You're locked.
Minnesota at Cincinnati. We got Saturday games starting now. Yep. College football over. So Cincinnati's a 4-point favorite at home. Over unders 39.5. Go with Zach.
I think this is a perfect opportunity to take advantage of the fact that the Vikings just might not be that good. Give me Cincy to win and cover 3.5.
Cy?
I'm going to go Cincy win and cover. Yeah.
Yep. Concur. I'm on Cincy as well. I think it's a good bet. Pittsburgh at the Colts. Colts I have 2.5-point favorites here. Over unders 42.5. I had this at Indy minus 6.5 because Pickett's already out, I think, right? So it's going to be Mitch Trubisky, who looked horrendous, truly horrendous on Thursday Night Football. I had this closer to 6.5, so I definitely have Indy winning and covering. Zach?
Same with me. Indy win and cover here.
Yeah, all bias aside, this is my best bet of the week because I expect us to bounce back after last week. And Trubisky looked awful last week.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. Denver at Detroit, super interesting Saturday night game. Detroit's a 4.5-point favorite at home. Over under is 46.5. Let's start with Cy.
You said 4.5-point favorite for Detroit?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to say Detroit wins. I'm going to go no cover. I don't want to bet on Detroit right now.
I'm going to say they do cover because they play so well at home. So, Zach?
I think this is actually a great time to bet on Detroit because they have to get things moving and grooving again. And the Broncos, they are 7-6, but they've kind of just showed their hand. There's not a lot of upside there. Give me Lions win cover.
Next game, Atlanta at Carolina. Must win for Atlanta. Atlanta's a 3-point favorite on the road. Over under is 35.5. I got Atlanta winning and covering here. Zach?
Atlanta winning cover.
Cy?
You said Carolina, Atlanta, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Atlanta win and cover. I'm surprised it's only 3.
Yeah, on the road. Chicago at Cleveland. Cleveland is a 3.5-point favorite at home. Over under is 38.5. Let's start with Zach.
Chicago at Cleveland. And what's the spread?
3.5, Cleveland.
Chicago money line.
Ooh, Cy?
I wanted to pick Chicago money line, but Cleveland's defense at home is too good. So I'm going to go Cleveland win, but no cover.
I'm going Chicago money line here as well. I think they'll struggle a little bit with the mobility of Fields and not be able to create so much havoc. So, and Fields is good on grass and in cold weather. Tampa Bay at Green Bay. Green Bay is a 3.5-point favorite at home, subject to change with their performance tonight. Over under 42.5. Let's start with Cy.
Green Bay win and cover.
Yep, I have the same. Zach?
Same here.
Jets at Dolphins. Jets played much better this week. Miami is a 12-point favorite at home. Again, subject to change. I will say Miami wins but doesn't cover. The Jets are on the right track after last week. Zach?
Dare I see Zach Wilson with a smile on his face for the first time this season? Give me a backdoor cover as well, so I don't think Miami covers at 10.5.
All right.
They're in Miami, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Miami win and cover.
All right. Giants at Saints. Saints are 6-point favorites at home. Over under 36.5. Zach?
Ooh, give me Saints win and cover.
All right. Ty?
Saints win and cover.
I'm going to say no cover. I just don't think the Saints are good at all. Houston at Tennessee. Tennessee's a 1.5-point favorite at home. Again, subject to change. Over under 37.5. Stroud in concussion protocol. I have this line saying that he's going to play, but I'm not totally sure on that. But I have Tennessee winning cover. I actually like this line a lot because, again, I think Tennessee at home is actually pretty good. So even if Stroud plays, I think they win and cover. Zach?
I agree. I agree with Evan here. Win and cover for Tennessee.
Oh my gosh. If Nico Collins is also playing, then I want to go Houston, but Nico might be out and there might be out someone else. Oh, this is so hard. Yeah, I'll go Tennessee win and cover.
All right. Kansas City at New England. Kansas City's a 10-point favorite on the road. Over under is 37.5. I have no cover. Kansas City's they're just not playing totally well right now. So, Zach?
I've got Kansas City win and cover. I think this is going to be a statement win.
5.
Yeah, this is the perfect time for KC to actually cover a spread for once. So I'm taking KC win and cover.
All right. San Francisco at Arizona. San Francisco is a 13.5-point favorite on the road. Over under is 48.5. Start with Cy.
SF win and cover.
Yep, same. They didn't last week, though, against Drew Lock. Zach?
Yeah, but that's because I think I held off here with the 10.5, which ultimately moved to 13.5. I do agree 49ers win and cover this one.
All right.
Yeah, we had them at 10.5, Evan.
Well, yeah, but with that was with Gino.
Yeah.
Commanders at Rams. Rams are 7-point favorites at home. Zach?
Washington money line.
All right. Have fun with that. Cy?
I'm going to go Rams win. Maybe not.
I actually debated that. Now I think I might switch in order to keep up with Zach. Actually, no, this is probably a freebie for me then. Rams win and cover.
Okay.
Dallas.
All three of us have completely different outcomes.
Dallas at Buffalo. Buffalo's a 2-point favorite at home. Over under is 49.5. Start with Cy.
Damn, this is a tough one. At Buffalo's the favorite.
Yep.
I'm riding the Dallas train, dude. I'm going to go Dallas money line.
Yeah, very difficult because I like the way Buffalo is trending. But I'm going to say Dallas finds a way to win. Very tough game, though. Zach?
I'll say, here we go. Bills Mafia. Bills win and cover this one easy.
I like that, Zach. Give us a little curveball.
You like that? You like that?
I like that.
I love
Yeah.
that cadence, man. I love that cadence from
Here we
Zach,
go.
but he's not coming away with a victory.
A little Lee Corso.
It's no Omaha. I just want to throw that out there. But yeah, continue.
Sunday Night Football, Baltimore at Jacksonville. Baltimore is a 3.5-point favorite on the road. Over under is 43.5. Let's go with Zach.
This is my favorite spread of the week. Ravens are going to win and cover this one.
Cy?
Yeah, I didn't catch who they were playing. Who was it?
Jacksonville. In Duval.
Oh man, I mean, I'll take Ravens win and cover. But Lawrence actually played. I mean, he threw picks, but he played. So yeah,
he looked healthy enough. Jacksonville money line. I think they need a statement win here to catch the momentum back. So I'm nervous about this pick, but I think they can find a way to win this one with another week of Lawrence getting better. Monday Night Football, Philly at Seattle. Philly is a 4-point favorite on the road. Over under is 47.5. I'm getting crazy in the primetime games, baby. I think Philly is really hitting the skids. I think Seattle needs a win to stay in the wild card race. If Geno plays, obviously, Seattle money line. Zach?
I completely agree with that assessment, Ev. But if he doesn't, which there is a probability, then I've got to switch the train back to the Eagles.
Yeah. You got to lock in a pick though. Are you going Seattle or are you going Philly based on the information available?
Hey, Gino, just take whatever potion that Trevor Lawrence did, and you'll be A-okay, man. Let's go Seahawks, baby. 12th man.
All right, man. Give me a pick back this week. Give me Philly to win and cover. Come on, this is such a bounce back opportunity for them after losing two big ones to good teams. I mean, come on, Philly's good. They're coming back.
I'm worried I gave a lot of picks back this week, but we'll see what happens. Any last words?
No, I'm just excited for fantasy football playoffs. I'm going to be watching in Vegas. So if you guys want me to lock any bets in for you live, you let me know. And yeah, I'll try to get some videos to show you guys later. But yeah, let's go.
Tua just fumbled at the goal line.
He just fumbled. Oh my gosh.
Oh boy.
You hate to see that.
That's a good start, Jeds. That is a good start to my.
We picked. Oh, sorry. Okay,
it's for me. For me, yeah.
I thought you meant I was confused. Yeah,
they were in a position, I feel like, to just run in with Mostert though, which would have been ideal from me getting into the playoffs and betting perspective. So
true.
But cool. It's Mondays down south, I guess.
Mondays down south.
See you guys next week.